The United Nations Secretary General calls Rohingya refugee stories unimaginable. Antonio Gutierrez visited them today in Bangladesh. He says he heard stories about migrants being murdered and raped, adding they only want justice and a safe trip home. 700,000 Rohingya have crossed the border to Bangladesh. They're escaping violence at the hands of the military. And persecuted Catholics in Myanmar also face growing problems. Myanmar is a Southeast Asian country. Of its 53 million people, only about 1% are Catholic. They're both a religious and an ethnic minority. To talk about this, we're joined by Philippe Nassif, Executive Director of In Defense of Christians. Welcome back.
Thank you for having us.
So what's the situation right now for Catholics in Myanmar?
So right now, the situation for Catholics and Christians across the board in Myanmar is really deteriorating quite rapidly. We have a very extremist Buddhist group that has started to really persecute the Christians on the ground in Myanmar across the board. First, they've been focusing on the Rohingya. They're an ethnic Muslim community in Myanmar that live in the western part of the country that you've all been reporting about. Now we have a Christian community, an ethnic minority, mainly the Kachin ethnicity that's in the northeast part of the country. They're predominantly Christian. Now they're under the gun. Their villages are being burned to the ground. They're being driven out of the country. And we're seeing a lot of reports just in the last couple of months of many of them being killed and driven from their lands.
It's a really sad story. I know the country's first and only Cardinal Bo, spoke to EWTN News Nightly, and he said that the Catholics in the country are well respected by the majority of Buddhists. It's a Buddhist majority country. How can that help alleviate the problem for the Christians right now?
You know, the issue is, and this is very similar to what we saw happening in other countries around the world. I'll use the Middle East as an example. In Iraq, where you had a lot of Christians with good relations with their Muslim neighbors, but when you have militant extremist groups with weapons, hundreds of men coming into your village, people are scared to stand up to them. So you can only hide a certain number of Christians in your basement or wherever in your property before they find you. And then they're going to go after the people that are protecting these communities. We're starting to see that happening in Myanmar right now, which is very concerning. We're seeing people sort of turning against these Christian villages. We're seeing neighbors that aren't standing up for them. And if they are, they're getting killed. Because as you can see, it doesn't really matter what religion you are in Myanmar. Apparently, whether you're a Muslim or you're Christian, whatever, you're getting targeted by these extremist Buddhist groups, and that's the problem.
So sad. And I know last year, I believe Pope Francis visited Myanmar. I'm just wondering how Christians can really help ease this ongoing persecution, if they can do anything at all.
Sure. I mean, I think that Pope Francis visiting sort of shed light on the fact that there are even Christians in Myanmar to begin with.
1% of the population, right?
1% of the population, and they've been there since 1548. I mean, some of the first Portuguese missionaries went to Myanmar and found a population that was very, very much, that loved hearing the gospel, and some of them converted, and these communities have been in existence ever since. So we have to sort of protect these communities as much as possible. And certainly, the administration here in the United States, members of Congress need to hear more about this issue. Having the Pope visit definitely started that dialogue. Now, unfortunately, with the sad news coming out of Myanmar, their plight has been elevated.
And it's just such a confusing issue because you've also got the persecution of the Rohingya going on as well, right. And all eyes are on that. And now you're bringing light to the fact that Catholics are being persecuted as well, which is really shocking as well. Right. I'm just wondering, as you consider your organization particularly advocates and has been doing a lot of advocating and lobbying on behalf of the Christians in the Middle East. Now you're focusing on Southeast Asia. I mean, this is a totally new realm for you, right?
It is. Well, we're still focused on the Middle East exclusively, but the thing is that with Myanmar, there are very few people that are talking about the Christian persecution. In particular, we've heard a lot about the Rohingya, that again are a Muslim population in Myanmar, the minority. What's happened to them is horrible. Now we're seeing it happen to the Christians. And there's a real similarity between the small Christian minority in Myanmar and the small Christian minorities we've been advocating for in Iraq. The similarity being that most Americans don't know they exist. And then before you realize it, they've been exterminated and they haven't been helped. So we stepped up to the plate. There's a coalition of faith-based international religious freedom organizations that are coming together to highlight the plight both of the Rohingya and the Christian population in Myanmar, and we're going to make sure that we're there by their side to sort of elevate these issues and come up with some solutions.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate it very much. Philippe Nassif, Executive Director of In Defense of Christians. Thanks so much.
Thank you.